Hi everyone, my name is Jimmie and I'm the founder of Afribuk Society. Today I'm being joined by a great educator from the UK, Miss Kavita Tanna. She's the Deputy Director of Inspire Citizen and who I believe that my life converges with hers in terms of her being my mentor, a friend, and a cook buddy. And we we compete in cooking and not really compete, but then she shares her wild escapades in the kitchen, showing her foods in many kind of visual representation as images. And I'm delighted that I'm connected to her today, with her today, and we are connected today in the knowledge of International Women's Day. And without much ado, I'd like to invite her to just share a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Jim. So you're right, we are connected because of so many different things, our passion for education, our passion for food, but also our love for one another. You've become one of my closest friends this year during a time where it felt like the world has lost its mind. And to quote, one of my favorite lyrics during this time, when the world has lost its mind, be more kind, my friend, be more kind. And we've really found that with each other. We found, that depth of kindness and just a common desire to do good in the world. And that's really what's exciting for me, to sort of get this time to hang out with you and talk more about the things that we want to achieve in the world, and to do my best to represent international women.
I think her thoughts were formed around the idea of COVID, and it's actually a good foundation to the questions that we're going to have to begin with. And this is just in appreciation of the many steps that women have taken in the world in the many fields. But today we're going to speak much about education and the place of women in education, and it's going to be through her voice and her work with many other educators in the world. She works a lot, and so my first question would be, what does the International Women's Day slogan, "Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID World," mean to you in your work?
Well, inevitably, when we think about women in leadership, education's an interesting area to think about that, because traditionally speaking, we would say that if we went into a typical school, the majority of the teachers in that school will be women. But then we take another step through the school and we look in the leadership positions in the school, and somehow the picture does not stay the same. Somehow we find a lot of men in the leadership positions in the school. And so, it's a natural curiosity, right? To wonder, well, how did that happen? Why did that happen? So thinking about leadership and thinking about it in the context of education, to me, it's a natural fit to start considering, okay, well, why is it, how is it that we have so many women in education as teachers, and in that way leaders in their classroom, yet when we think about the positions of authority, maybe not so much? And what effect has that had on the education that's being delivered around the world? Because I spend a lot of my time wondering, well, where's the human in that? And school, unfortunately, has become quite an automated procedure. We've talked about this a lot in terms of your educational experience and how it felt until you met an educator that was different. But until that point, it felt like you were just getting through each grade. Just get through each grade, learn what I need to learn in this grade, and just get through. And recently I watched an animated video that was overlaid with a commentary, and the illustrator literally demonstrated school in that way, and depressingly had in that factory machine, creativity leaking out, collaboration leaking out. And it was just such a sad picture for me to see, you know, to see that someone had really captured what they felt was the essence of school in that way. And so, you know, going back to the tagline for International Women's Day this year, it's really become essential to have a more balanced perspective, I think, in leadership. And to really sort of think about, you know, the yin and the yang and the balance that was always meant to be in our energetic fields, and to really think about, well, what is the importance of education? What is the, you know, the importance of really setting our children up to be leaders of the future? Can we do that with a stronger female perspective, I wonder?
You know, listening to you just usually has this burst of so much knowledge that I pick, and I try to jot them down and for later referencing and all that. And you just mentioned a term called traditional and traditional education and all that. I'm not going to ask about that. I'm going to take you back to the younger years of yourself. Did you envision yourself being an educator?
So one of the things that has been interesting for me is that although I only officially qualified, you know, just over 10 years ago as a teacher, you know, in sort of the the school system that we have today, everyone that's always known me has always said, you've been doing it since you could talk yourself, you know. And so that's why it seemed like an obvious piece of advice to all of my, you know, from all of my friends, that when I felt like it, you know, I was done in the career that I was pursuing at the time, for them to say, but you've been, you know, hanging out with kids in your spare time, doing voluntary work with them, tutoring your nieces and nephews. You were even tutoring your friends when you were all studying for the same exams, you know, like, why don't you just make that your full-time work? It seemed so obvious to them. And it was like, to me, I was like, oh yeah, I could do that full-time. You know, and so yeah, so, you know, for everyone around me, it was the most obvious thing in the world that I should be doing this full-time.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's the idea that people see the best in us, that sometimes we do not actually see that. And also it's the idea that we'll always come back to our truer self, or to our truth. And that is something that I picked from you, and the many conversations that we've had. The idea of truth, the idea of just knowing that you have to focus on your passion, and just try and find that place that clicks. I believe that there have been a lot of challenges in terms of women, and I'm speaking women in terms of your age, or just tell me the biggest issues that you face for women your age personally, and the women generally. You can mention the women in your career and the children as well, who are young girls.
So I think the interesting thing about my generation is that we're sort of in that in-between age, I think, where you know, I'm of Indian descent, right? And so, you know, one of my friends once said to me that if she was to put all of her Indian friends on a spectrum, and on one end is the most traditional, on one end is the most modern, she would definitely put me on the most traditional. And I was so surprised to hear that, because I didn't feel that I was being so traditional, right? I thought that, okay, maybe I'm not so modern, but at least I'm halfway, right? But her feeling was like, no, like, you know, you're house proud, you'll do everything and anything for your family, you'll always put them first. You know, you know how to cook, to clean, to do all of the things, and you're educated and you're doing everything else. But the main thing is the priority that you give to your family. And so for our generation, you know, I have tried to live a life where I've been able to sort of follow that protocol of yes and, you know, both and sort of thing. But for some of my friends and some of my family, it's really felt like it's an either or situation, that I can't have it all, you know? And that's really because we've been brought up in a very patriarchal sort of setup, you know, family and everything, where okay, you can have a career so that, you know, you can find a good husband, but then after that, you're at home and you're doing everything for your husband and his parents, and you're, you know, you're at home with your kids, and you're doing everything for them. And yeah, you might go out to work, but you do like a 9 to 5 job or a 10 to 2 job, or, you know, something that means that you're at home in time to do everything for the family again. And so, you know, when I look at some of my younger cousins and some of the younger girls, you know, that are like my nieces and children that I've been teaching, it really varies across different cultures as to whether there's still that perception. You know, one of the students that I was teaching grade 1 in China, her grandparents were bringing her to school every day, and the story that she had is that one day I'll go to Harvard. And I said, okay, great, you're going to be a Harvard graduate, and then what? Well, then I'll get married and be at home with my family. And it was like, oh, okay. You know, and she was like 5 or 6 years old, right? So there's still that perception for a young girl. You know, one of the things that upset me a lot recently was this idea that, you know, a younger sister saw herself as a liability because she was trying to go through education. But I don't think that the brother would see himself that way, you know? And it's that self-perception. Where has that come from, right? Where is that coming from? It's so, is it so ingrained in society that we feel that way? Is it something that, you know, we still have to be aware of? I mean, one of the Sustainable Development Goals refers to it, right? Of gender equality. And so, you know, in that sense, we've got 9 years left to rid the world of the stereotyping, to rid the world of this way of thinking where, you know, what are we actually saying to our young girls? Are we really saying to them that you can't have it all, that you can be everything everywhere? And also, what are we telling the boys? You know,
Yeah.
because like we said at the beginning, one of your passions is cooking, one of my passions is cooking. But if we look at the stereotypical roles that are taken in the home, cooking isn't one of them for a guy, right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
stereotypically, you know, but why not? And
Mm.
power to you for it, you know. But even if we look at that industry, you know, if I try to think of the famous chefs, for some reason, male ones come to mind first.
Mhm.
And is that because I'm surprised that they're in that industry, or is it just that the ones that seem to get more attention are male? I don't know what it is. Like,
Mm.
it's a very strange sort of thing to think about, because it's been going on for such a long time now, you know?
Um, I I like the phrase yes and, because it puts some question to the thoughts that people have, and just builds on curiosity. And in turn, curiosity kind of really develops a person to make better decisions, or to know what's better, or what's next. Um, you have you have broken so much ceilings in terms of geographically. You have moved away from London and worked in Beijing, and also you have defied a lot of world's position in terms of how they place women in the world, and the stereotypes around being a woman. Is this true? Can you just talk about the ceilings that just
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that's interesting is that I've been wanting to live and work abroad since the age of 15 or 16. And, you know, it took 2 decades for me to be able to get there, you know, to be able to do that. And one of the main reasons was around safety. And so, you know, for a lot of women, that's safety, security, support, you know, those 3 key words define for them what they can do and what they can't do, because there's this sense of, you know, the man needs to protect us kind of thing. Whereas, you know, one of the things that I dream of is living in a world where we don't need to have that sense of fear, you know, for our sisters and our mothers and by our sisters and our mothers, you know. And so, you know, that there's a lot of work to be done in that area. But yes, you're right. You know, I do feel that me moving to China broke through some of those barriers and has opened the doors for others to do the same. I do feel that being brave enough to go out on my own and be working, you know, with different organizations, doing a number of different things around the world is breaking these glass ceilings for people, you know, after me. And, you know, I had cause to say to you and to other people, you know, recently that we can learn from the lessons of others. We don't have to go through the same suffering in order to learn those lessons. And so, you know, some of the limitations that I've faced, I'm hoping others won't have to face because I've done it, you know, because I've been there and I've gone through it. And the thing is that, you know, not wanting to overcomplicate matters, but it does make a difference, right? That I'm an Indian woman. So I have two things that I'm sort of working with, you know, there's my ethnicity and there's my gender, and how the two play with one another and how people perceive me as a result, and what people, you know, will imagine that I will be thinking or assume that I would be, you know, willing to do or not willing to do, and things like that. So there's, you know, it's a layered sort of situation, really. But yeah, I think I feel like I can feel proud of what I've achieved in this time, for sure.
Yeah, you should. You should be proud. I believe that your thoughts in this conversation that we're having today would really inspire more people and more children to just be able to dare to dream, or dare abroad, or dare, just the idea of daring. So just to dial back to education and the connection around gender equality and international women's, um, what other kinds of marginalizations and erasures have we normalized in the education sector? Because, sorry to cut you short, there's pronouns that I'm not conversant with. I just keep on seeing them, and I'd like you to actually touch on them also and just enlighten me more.
Sure. So yeah, as you say, you know, oftentimes you'll enter a Zoom room and people will have put the pronouns that they prefer to be referred to by, like, you know, like she, her, or, you know, he, him, or whatever, and we, they, etc., etc. So I think, you know, when we're thinking about the norms, that word has now become a little bit of a like trigger in a way that, you know, like people are sensitive to it. And so, you know, just recently, you know, we were having a conversation around, okay, you know, why is it, for example, that, you know, we still have single gender use bathrooms, you know, because people are sort of finding themselves discovering and being more vocal about the fact that they don't identify as one particular gender or another. So, you know, is it just a case of literally breaking down walls, you know,
Yeah.
and literally sort of being like, okay, you know, this is a mixed place kind of thing, you know, and you know, I don't see a problem with that personally. You know, again, there are, you know, safety concerns, which is unfortunate. So, you know, like having that option for a woman to use a private room, you know, and for her to feel comfortable in that space, great, you know, and, you know, the disabled toilets and things like that, you know, just for sort of dignity and self-respect if that's what's needed. But I think that generally speaking, you know, as you say, there are a lot of norms that have been created, and partly I think is because of the focus as well in our history education. You know, that when we think about who do we learn about in our history, who do, you know, like who is the focus on? Like when I think about my education, I don't remember learning anything about things like the suffragette movement or any strong women at all. You know, things like learning about Henry VIII or learning about, you know, the awful sort of acts of dictators, you know, all of which were male. You know, so there really has been a bias in our education towards men. either in a positive light or a negative light, but either way, it's been more biased towards their achievements and the contributions that they've made to the way that society is today. But now that I've been re-educating myself, relearning, you know, I've come to learn more and more and more about powerful women in history because of my own interest, and really starting to understand more, you know, what not only what contribution have they made, but also the image that's coming to my mind as I'm talking to you is the reminder of the role that women have played. When, you know, I think about recently, it's been well publicized, the cover of the Indian sort of focus on women was a drawing by an 8th grader who had asked his dad, what does mom do? And his dad had said, she doesn't work. But then a young boy illustrated all of the work that he sees his mom doing. And that was such a powerful image and such a powerful, deep understanding of the contribution that women are making all day, every day, mostly unrecognized and unfortunately unthanked as well.
Yeah, sadly it's unthanked. So I actually believe in your sentiments in terms of the erasures in our education system, and having been through an interview session before, and we were discussing about a community in America that their history had already been erased, and most of the dwellers in that community who grew up, who are young like me, do not know much about that community. And that is the sad truth. And I believe there are many erasures even in my own context as a young man being raised by a single mother. There's many things that a lot of praise would be bestowed to my dad, other than my mom. And growing up knowing that my mom does a lot than my dad, you know, I believe that that is a place where I could advocate more and say, no, my mom does more and does more. So I'm just delighted by your sentiments. So do you, because previously we've sat on another just another panel before, and we talked about the future of education and how promising it is, and how wonderful that COVID came. And I'm sorry that I'm saying wonderful. And I know many people have lost their lives, but then I'm just trying to say that it's wonderful because it's a place where a lot of redesigning, a lot of reinvention could come in. And how does the future of the education sector for women look like? For women in the sector look like post-COVID?
So I think that the most valuable sort of takeaway from this time is that it has given cause for pause, right? And so in creating that pause, I hope that it is causing people to reflect on what they value the most, and what, you know, as a society, what do we think is important?
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, at the same time that we were suffering through this global pandemic and lives were lost, you know, the world had to stand witness to a brutal murder, right, with George Floyd. And so again, you know, we were given cause to pause on that as well. And now, you know, my hope is that there doesn't need to be such a dramatic reason to reflect on the inequalities of women, you know, the absolute inequitable situation that, you know, we face currently. Because, you know, some of the statistics that I've become more aware of recently are things like the pay scales, and, you know, like how differently women are treated, and also this idea that some women feel that they need to act in a very male dominant way in order to get ahead. And I'm very curious about that because, you know, I had a direct experience of that in a school where, you know, a new member of staff was joining the team. And I took out a day of every week of the 6-week holiday in order to sort of acclimatize her to the school, to the culture, to the curriculum, to, you know, like all these different things. And next thing I knew, she was just like, I have to be the head of the grade. I have to lead on this. I have to do that. And like, you know, it was just like, it was like, you know, like you kind of feel like you're like kind of you've been spun, like, you know, like literally like, you know, like this whirlwind has come in. And I was literally just like, oh my goodness, like, you know, we went from collaboration that I was, you know, sort of initiating into this really uncomfortable competition, you know, that I just couldn't understand. And it was basically that she felt that she had to behave that way in order to get ahead. And you know, someone once told me about how this is a very crab-like way of being, that, you know, if you put crabs in a bucket, instead of learning that they can climb on top of one another so that they can get on the top and then pull each other out, they're pulling on each other and then just dragging each other back in. And I feel like, you know, one of the best gifts that sort of floats around every year on International Women's Day is a gif of one woman pulling the other woman up, and then, you know, and then that one pulls another one up, and then that one pulls another one up. And that's really sort of the kind of education that I hope we can aspire to in the future, where we're encouraging one another and lifting one another up in a way that is modeling it to the younger generation of this is how we should behave with one another, whether we're male, female, transgender, you know, queer, gay, whatever we are. It doesn't really matter, you know, what our, you know, sort of identification is when it comes to gender. But the main thing is that we're lifting each other up and we're encouraging one another, motivating one another, inspiring one another to be the best that we can be. Yeah.
I I believe that I'm the creator of this phrase where I say, let's not be think tank, let's be a do tank or something of the sort. Unless there's someone who built it up or who coined it up. But I just want to call myself in that person. You have shared a little bit about your work in a classroom or in the school setting where you try to help uh, um, a teacher who's a woman to just acclimatize and be part of. I'm trying to. I just want to know what are the ways, because what are the ways of fostering gender equality in a classroom setting? Because now we have thought about that. How can we be able to do them? How can teachers in my community or in the world who are going to probably view this to just be able to to make good of what is being said?
Yeah, absolutely. I think an interesting sort of project, I guess you would say, that I was involved in was that I was working with a school's early childhood centre, and they were looking at, you know, in the play setting, they were seeing that there was already a lot of gender stereotyping going on in terms of the colours and the toys that the children in the class would choose. And so what they decided to do was to make it a focus in the classroom of really providing a wide range of toys, a wide range of colours, and talking to the children about why are you, you know, choosing that over that, you know, and it, whether it was a stereotypical choice or not, you know, they weren't sort of trying to only find out about why a boy chose blue and won't choose pink, or they weren't trying to only look at why a girl might choose trucks and not choose the dolls, you know, like it wasn't sort of in that way. It was universal, just to try and understand, you know, where is that preference coming from? And it's really interesting to think about that in the context of what you and I have talked about so many times before, and that's the power of conversation, right? And one of the things that I, say quite often is don't assume anything, it just makes an ass out of you and me, right? It's in the word itself. And so if we could support educators to really create a classroom environment where it is more play-based learning, more playful learning, more open learning. So there is more student choice, more student agency, more student voice. Then there would be more time and more space and more room to have those conversations one-on-one, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, or maybe even, create opportunities for the students to be having those conversations and you're just actively listening as the educator. But really that's really where the magic will happen, in my opinion. That, the more we move to an education system where we're trying to create learning experiences rather than teacher to student, and it's sort of, passing down knowledge as though everything that they need to know and that's all there is to the world. More sort of exploratory learning, more discovery, more learning based on curiosity. I mean, we talked about that concept already.
Yes.
But really thinking about, well, what are their interests? How can we inspire them by being so passionate about our own interests? And then finding out through conversation why do you have those preferences, and why does your friend have those preferences, and finding out, are people just following their friends' choices? So, is it like that, we're just trapped in this cycle then because, daddy chooses this, so then son chooses this, and then his friends follow him, and that's what's cool, so that's what everyone does? Or is it, the same with the girls? Or is it that the girls have been told, you can't do that? But we won't know, right, until we start having these conversations with these young people, and until we start making time in the day to have these conversations with these young people.
You have touched on the family aspect that our students are brought up in, the dad, mom, and relatives, and all that. And while we have touched on classroom a little bit, my wondering is around how can parents or how can families be able to extend this work that you and many educators like you are doing, to be able to bridge or to be able to teach in such a way that girls or boys are both equal in a classroom setting?
Mm-hmm. So that again comes down to education, right? Because our parents, they know what they know. They've lived the life that they've lived. And so they've stood witness to how their parents were. And then they've been through a schooling system or not, or moved through a world where those stereotypes have been reinforced. And so at this point, the parent generation, they do hold some responsibility to re-educate themselves. And so that's going to take engagement with the educators, with school, other organizations outside of school, in order to change that way of thinking, in order to show them that there is a different way. And in doing that, you're not diminishing your children's prospects in any way. You're not diminishing their manhood or their female qualities or whatever, because that's a real fear, I think, still in some of the older generations, that by, for example, some might say that you're being incredibly brave to wear something with a slight pink shade in it, but for me, I don't see anything, but for some people, that's the perspective they hold, right? And so really sort of there, like I said, earlier on, this generation that we have currently is quite an interesting one in terms of the responsibilities they hold to change the path for the future, and how, we as educators, I feel that our responsibility is to invite them in. And some educators, that's really scary. The idea of having parents in their classroom or meeting with the parents outside of the set, parent-teacher evening, or or even at most at a student-led conference or something. But, you know, the idea of there being a continual dialogue to a lot of teachers feels like a lot more work, a lot harder, because there probably are going to be difficult conversations to be had. But, you know, this is a bigger conversation around empowering educators and giving them that confidence. And again, that safety, that security, that support from school, from the administration, that you can have regular conversations with parents and will support you in whatever it is that you're saying to them and the work that you're doing and so on. And so this is really systemic change that we're getting into now. But, you know, to make the long story short, in order for there to be the changes that we want to see in the family, there is going to need to be that open invitation by the educators that can see that change is needed, you know.
Yeah. Your thoughts around inviting the stakeholders, which I believe the parents are stakeholders, into this fold that we called education, because is resonant with me, because I love that. I believe in that as a launching pad for a lot of learning and a lot of relearning of the many things that our parents or people who are born earlier than us believed in, or the traditional education is stemmed around. That is how we can be able to guide our students into being able to just guide their own learning, to be able to just be the leaders of their own learning. And we're getting towards the end of our conversation here today, and I'm gonna give you an opportunity to be able to have one last remark that would change the world, like Malala here. so on International Women's Day, what is the most important message you want to send out to young women thinking about their careers? This conversation will go to the hands of many teachers who would like, or many people in different fields who would like to venture into teaching or education, or people who are in education and want to add another level of leadership in education, or children who are learning, who want to be able to define or to be able to get a grasp, of where the direction is in terms of careers. So could you just tell us, or just really give us an important message that you want best to go with?
Absolutely. So I think I would want to take a step back and say that this message is not only for women, because International Women's Day is just one day, and it comes around every year. So let's say it's one day out of 365, some years 366. But the message stands strong every day. And to celebrate a woman, to celebrate a human, is a daily practice. And it's something that we have to practice. That means that we need to do it on repeat and keep building upon it and keep building upon it. And so the first step then is creation, right? To create that intention. So if we're starting from there, let's create that intention that all of us should be educated people. And so I'm going to paraphrase a quote that I came across recently that said, to be an educated person is to know your gifts and give them to the world. So my plea to all of us is to know ourselves so well, to understand our own gifts that we have and that we hold in our hearts, in our souls, in our very being, to know them so well that we can freely give them to the world and really be the best person that we can be and be living out our life's purpose in that way. And so, in order to do that, we have to remember that we're all connected, right? So whether I'm a woman and you're a man, whether I'm older, whether you're younger, whether I'm Indian, whether you're African, none of these things matter in the end, because I have a gift and I'm giving it to you. You have a gift and you're giving it to me. And all those falsehood, all those boundaries, all those differences somehow melt away, because the greatest gift of all is love, right? But after that, you know, you have your own gifts to share and I have mine to share, and we both need them and the world needs them. So stand strong in who you are, take that time, invest that time in yourself to know who you are, what your gifts are, and really, really be free to give them to the world, share them, spread them far and wide, and really, you know, be at everything that you were sent here to be.
So we're coming to the end of our conversation today. My name is Jimmie and I'm the founder of Afribuk. If you want to support us, please reach me at J__Chengo on Twitter. And to get to know and follow Kavita's work, please follow her at Twitter at Kavita Tanna on Twitter. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we wish you a happy Easter.